Good evening and welcome to the 2022 State of the City. I'm Ann Bybee, Vice Mayor for the City of Campbell, and we are pleased to have you with us today. I will start this evening off by inviting two of our youth commissioners, Amelie Garango and Palace Lemmerjohn, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and provide us with a short reading.
Hello, my name is Palace Lemmerjohn, and I am currently a member of the Campbell Youth Commission. Would everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amelie Rango, and I was a member of the Youth Commission for 3 terms. The Commission has been an amazing way for the youth of Campbell to make their voices heard and engage with the Campbell community. As youth, we are the dreamers and thinkers of tomorrow, and we believe it is our shared responsibility to help build a welcoming, safe, and prosperous community for all residents of Campbell. I would like to read a short poem by Amy Ludwig Vanderwater titled Let's. Let's not talk about bullies. Let's teach each other to care. Let's bring our favorite snacks to school, and then let's sit and share. Let's eat and tell stories of people right here in our neighborhood who open doors and feed small birds, who make us want to be good. Let's read books about people who make our world better somehow. Let's make a plan to help our world. Let's make it better now. Let's look for goodness all year long. Let's write the things we find. I'll learn from you, you'll learn from me. Together, let's be kind. Let's hold the door for someone. Let's feed a bird in the air. Let's not talk about bullies. Let's teach each other to care.
Excellent job, and thank you both for being here and starting us all off on a positive note. Now I'd like to recognize some of the community leaders who have joined us today. If you could please raise your hand as you are recognized, and please hold applause until all guests have been introduced. Baltazar Lopez, Senior Representative from Congresswoman Anna Eshu's office. Mark Berman, California State Assembly Member, District 24. Heather Wilson, representing Santa Clara County Supervisor, Board President Mike Wasserman. Michael Norris, who is representing Santa Clara County Supervisor Susan Ellenberg. Tina Walia, Mayor, City of Saratoga. Darcy Paul, Mayor of Cupertino. Maria Risto, Vice Mayor, Town of Los Gatos. Yen Yao, Council Member, City of Saratoga. Hung Wei, Council Member, City of Cupertino. Representing Santa Clara County Fire District is Suwana Gergau, who is the newly appointed Fire Chief. Assistant Fire Chief Brian Glass, and Deputy Chief Dennis Lawley. Jennifer Weeks from the Santa Clara County Library. Mandy Capello from the West Valley Mission Community College Vice Chancellor and former Mayor of Saratoga. I don't know if Brad Davis arrived. He's signed up to be here, but he's the West Valley Mission Community College Chancellor, but I haven't seen him yet. Dan Furtado, former Mayor of the City of Campbell, and Jason Baker, former Mayor of the City of Campbell. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone. So now you could please join me in a big round of applause. Thank you all for being here and for joining us tonight. We're honored to have you in our attendance. Next, I would like to introduce the members of the city's senior staff. City Manager Brian Leventhal, City Clerk Andrea Sanders, City Attorney Bill Seligman, Assistant City Manager Angelique Gaeta, HR Manager Jenny Lee Christensen, Information Technology Manager Cecil Lawson, with the camera right in front here, Police Chief Gary Berg, Finance Director Will Fuentes, Community Development Director Rob Eastwood, Public Works Director Todd Capurso, Recreation and Community Services Director Natasha Bissell. She's in the back there. Last but not least, I want to introduce my colleagues on the Campbell City Council. Councilmember Elizabeth Gibbons, Councilwoman Susan Landry, and Councilmember Sergio Lopez. And now, what we've all been waiting for, please welcome Campbell Mayor Paul Reznikov, who will deliver the stage.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. So welcome to Campbell. Appreciate you being here, our 70th year, and welcome to the State of the City. So I want to first of all, thank you, Vice Mayor Bybee, for the introductions you did tonight. I want to thank the musicians that were here earlier. They did a great job. Our youth commissioners, who always do a great job, so thank you for participating. Thank you, council members, for being here. Nothing gets done unless we work together, at least a consensus of at least 3. And city staff, most importantly, because no matter what direction we give, what vision we have, it's city staff that implements it. So without city staff, nothing happens. And when it gets implemented, if it doesn't work, then it's usually the implementation, not the vision. But that's our perspective. It's a good council perspective. So I want to talk about today's state of the city and talk about where we've been in the last year, in particular where we're going. The overview of all this is that Campbell is a fiscally sound city. This is a huge deal given the last 2 years and where we've been. It's a very safe community. I'll talk about that. And to me, whether you live here, work here, or are visiting here, it's a great place to be, and I'll make the case for that. So when we talk about fiscally sound, we really can't start anywhere but COVID. You know, when this started, council, staff, none of us were any more prepared to deal with the pandemic than anyone in this room. And very quickly, we were looking at about a $9 million deficit, which is about 15% of our budget. So this is from a loss of sales taxes, a loss of program revenues, and a loss of other fees. So through strong management, some very skilled people, I give a lot of credit to our IT people to quickly turn things around. Ultimately, some unexpected government assistance for sure. We weathered that storm. So we continued to provide essential services. We enabled a remote workforce. We enabled remote meetings. And with labor's help, frankly, to share in some of the fiscal pain, we are recovering nicely. You know, we've always prided ourselves, we balance our budget, and we have to balance our budget by law. But we balance our budget without typically tapping into reserves. So this is the equivalent of paying your bills monthly and not running up in credit card debt and not dipping into your savings, so that we have a downturn, we're prepared for it. And in this case, obviously, the downturn was the pandemic. So the pandemic created a lot of fiscal challenges. It created a lot of operational challenges. Working together, all these groups, we overcame most of them. So I hate to use the word positive when we talk about COVID, but here's things that happened that made our operations better. We quickly changed service models and moved things online, something that we had challenges with for years in doing. We embraced remote access. We increased efficiency. We reduced costs. Overnight, in some areas, our recreation programs, for example, went away overnight. They just didn't exist anymore. And yet, other public spaces in our parks, all of a sudden the use went way up because the one place you could go from quarantine in a small group, say a family group, was to the park, to the Orchard Green, and picnic areas popped up everywhere. So that use went up. And our meetings now are back live, but we continue to work in a hybrid mode. So we are live. You can come to our meetings and participate in person, but you can also participate on Zoom. Remote access to meetings was something we were always told for years you can't do, but the pandemic created a situation where we had no choice. And we've increased transparency. That should continue. I thank in particular IT for being able to pull that off. It's not an easy task. And also thanks to the city clerk, because we have to manage people in our facility, we manage people online, and they all participate equally. So I mentioned labor. We had immediate impacts in some areas, especially recreation, where programs just went away overnight. And of course, there were some associated, mostly part-time jobs with that. But our goal as council was to minimize the impact on full-time positions, on permanent positions, something that really wouldn't have been possible without labor understanding and accepting limited furloughs and knowing that in that year's contract we were limited by what we could do in terms of benefits and salaries. We froze open positions where we could. We cut discretionary spending to almost zero. And through that partnership with labor, we navigated through this area to the point where we could start recovering. Now, because of that, I'm so pleased to say one major accomplishment we have. We just recently agreed to 3-year labor agreements with every labor group but the one that's still under contract through the end of the year. And I have all hopes and confidence that that will follow. This means that after a very, very tough year for labor, they have 3 years of stability and security. The city has 3 years of stability and security, and the city can financially plan for those costs. And we have to be a council where 40% of the council, because of term limits in particular, is going to turn over. This new council doesn't have to deal with this right away, which is a really positive thing. So I'm very proud of that. As I said, we continue to recover. We rely so much on property taxes, and our property taxes are expected to grow this year by 6.3%. Now, to give you an idea of how important that is to us and what it means to us, I saw a stat recently that I had to double and triple check. So recently, the median home price in Campbell peaked at just shy of $2.2 million, which is stunning. I mean, it's just stunning. And actually in Campbell, that's also the average. So the average I could almost accept. There's some high-end houses. The median saying as many are selling above 2.2 as below. It tells you, one, that the property taxes are really, really important to us. It also tells you really how unaffordable it is to be here. Our sales taxes are coming back, but not at that same rate. We have service fees coming back, but not yet to pre-pandemic levels, unfortunately, and our hotel tax is coming back as well. Not quite to pre-pandemic levels, but as high as it's been since COVID, which is a really good sign of a recovering economy. So, there's no question we've also benefited from so-called ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act, that provided money for the city and other cities as well for operations, capital projects, other initiatives. And because of all of that, we just recently adopted our fiscal year 23 budget. That budget, general fund, is about $61.5 million, which is very close to where it was pre-COVID. We are in the next 5 years are going to spend over $90 million in capital improvements. The number's somewhat skewed because we have a library and police buildings in process, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, I mentioned here that Campbell is a safe community. I don't know, I have so many police officers standing here now, I don't know. I feel safe in here, but I wonder outside. In 2021, our serious crimes were essentially even or a little bit below pre-pandemic levels. And that, in Campbell, the biggest number there are property thefts and burglaries. So I always pose the number of the question for residents. We abut the 10th largest city in the country. Criminals don't respect boundaries. So what do we do differently? And it's a few things to make this city safe. So we've always gotten ahead of the curve in hiring. Since I've been on council, we've always looked and said we see retirements coming, we see unexpected injuries, short-term, long-term. We've always gotten ahead of the curve to have as many officers on the street as possible. Now, the last couple of years, that's become real hard because nationwide, there's just not as many recruits that want to go into public safety. So we continue to do the best we can there. But we've also invested in infrastructure. So we've invested internally. Infrastructure internally would be things like dispatch, things like records management that let us operate more efficiently. Externally, we invest in body cams that we have had in the city for many years. We invest in car cams. We invest in a system called an Axon system that enables our officers in the field to talk and to share audio and video, and this makes them more efficient. We can dispatch more quickly. They're efficient in communications. It keeps our officers safer, and frankly, I think it's safer for everybody they engage with. The third part of this is our residents. Our residents have always gotten a message from Campbell PD, be vigilant. If you see something, report it. And our residents do that very, very well. And then the biggest portion here is in Campbell, when they report something, our officers go out and investigate whether it's small or large. And that's always been the message I've heard from day one of talking with PD here, because even the smallest thing can be indicative of something bigger. So our police force tells them, report it, and we'll go out there. And that's unique. Not every city does that, and we should appreciate that more. But it's a big part of what makes us safe. And that public safety is a great part of what makes us a great place to be, right? I mean, I've always said, personally, public safety is the #1 thing that the government provides to its citizens. We have done surveys of our residents for priorities and for satisfaction, and the 1 and 2 number that comes up, #1 is police, #2 is fire. It's the most important thing. So it makes us this, a large part is why this is a great place to be. In addition, our downtown over the last year has been recovering nicely. We see new businesses down there, restaurants and retail. It's becoming vibrant again. And though brick and mortar still always will have challenges with online competition, the Prune Yard as well is bringing new businesses. A lot of these are locally owned businesses, so that's a positive. If we get away from the financial part of what makes the city so great, we're an environmentally friendly city. We are in our 40th consecutive year as a Tree City USA. We are also an age-friendly, we have an age-friendly designation from the World Health Organization. We've also taken actions to become more pet-friendly. And if you're like me, if you have a dog, that's an important thing. I can tell you that people have told me during COVID, sometimes the only time people went out is to walk their dog, and the fact they could walk through the park on leash made a big difference to them. So it helps. There's tremendous community spirit here. In the pre-COVID, our volunteers did about 18,000 hours of volunteer service here, and I think we'll get back to that soon, I'm sure. So I want to talk a little bit about this past year. I mentioned downtown we have a number of new retailers and restaurants. There's 2 very visible things that have changed downtown in the last year. One, of course, is the construction on top of OPA. And this is 11,000 square feet of office space and a second story. So it brings needed visitors to downtown during the day. We have a big influx at night, but during the day this brings in office workers who can utilize our services, our retailers, and our restaurants. This is the building that you saw in the first slide. You see it up here now, and it has public art, the Love Mural. The second most visible thing downtown are the parklets. So when restaurants were living under quarantines and living under distancing, we created the parklets to allow more seating on the street. This helped a lot of them survive during COVID. We are continuing this program. You're going to look for upgrades, so it'll be a little aesthetically nicer. It'll be a consistent design. But now that people can go inside, there are still some that don't feel comfortable going inside. And in other cases, if they fill up inside and have extra capacity outside and it speeds up their recovery, that's a positive thing. I mentioned the Prune Yard, also new businesses opening up. One change that you might see in the Prune Yard, that this is just an idea, not firm, but the Prune Yard has a multi-phased upgrade that's been going on for years, and the final phase of that was going to be including a 4th office tower. Now, COVID's changed the way people go to work, and not everybody goes to an office, and there may not be a need for an office tower. So one of the thoughts has been to include that as a potential site for housing. So you could have housing on that parcel. If you think about it, this is housing that's near services, it's right near retailers and restaurants. You can walk to a supermarket, you can walk to downtown, you can even walk to 2 light rail stations and bus lines. So it's in our housing element as a planned possibility, but it's certainly an interesting thing that might enhance the Prune Yard space. Talk about new housing development. When I stood here 4 years ago, my first term as mayor, I talked to you about the Cressley Homes project next to Campbell Park that was going to be built then, and here we are. I'm here 4 years later telling you about the Cressley Park project that's going to be built next to Campbell Park. It's 59 residential units with 9 below market. It's 6,500 square feet of commercial space. Clearly, COVID slowed everything down, but if you go and take a look, the buildings are gone, the property is raised, they're moving forward with that project. And I think up here we're showing you another project. The one on the upper right, just an example of the type of projects we're building in Campbell. That is by Mozart and Bascom. So you may or may not know Campbell extends all the way down Bascom, almost to 85. There's pockets there. A lot of people don't know that. That is 25 single homes, including 2 below market units as well. We have other projects like that planned. I mentioned a couple times here about the low market component. When we build new developments, if they're of a certain size, a minimum size, we include below market housing requirements. That could be rentals that rent for less than market rates. It could be sale units that sell for less than market rates. based on federal poverty levels and people qualifying for it. One of the things we've done the last couple of years, we spent a lot of time and a lot of money. You want to make sure when you have a below market program that the people in those units are the ones that qualify and should be in those units, because there are otherwise other people that should be in them. We have cleaned that up. For rentals, you do have to qualify every year. I can tell you right now, in our rental properties, the people in those properties qualify currently and should be in those properties. Nobody is subletting, nobody is not qualified anymore. It should be moved to market value, market rate. For our for sale units, you don't have to requalify, but you have to live in the property. You can't use it as an investment property. We have cleaned that up as well, so I can say very proudly that in our below market rentals and for sale units, the people in there are the ones that should be in there, and we don't have anybody holding up a spot to somebody who is in fact more deserving. I want to talk about parks and open space. In December of 21, we opened up the first all-inclusive, all-accessible playground at John D. Morgan Park. So this is a huge deal. This means that thousands of people with various medical conditions, be they auditory, visual, sensory, have a playground they can go to and use, and they can't do that at other parks. So this was a really great joint project with the county. We shared the cost. It was a 50-50 cost. We couldn't have done it otherwise. So it took a few years. It started. I think you saw some pictures of here. This is the opening. You see former Supervisor Yeager, current Supervisor Ellenberg. This started with a call to me from Supervisor Yeager at the time when I was mayor, saying, would we be interested in a grant that we could match to get this kind of thing in here, and staff and council jumped on it. So that opened up. It's a great example of working together. I was showing, I think there's a picture up here of the park course as well at Campbell Park. So that was not done in the last year, but that's just another example of working in partnerships. So that one's up here for two reasons. It's near and dear to my heart because when I was on the Parks and Rec Commission many years ago, we came up with this idea of doing this park course. But that entire project was done with private donations. So that came from individuals, it came from organizations in Campbell. The city's expense was the existing staff to oversee the program and to inspect the program at the end. So it's just another example of doing a partnership in a very cost-effective way. Speaking of Campbell Park, we are also upgrading the playground at Campbell Park. This is an image of what it will look like, and there's an image to follow of the current status of it. We are also adding into the parks and around the city 15 new water refill stations. So in keeping with our environmentally friendly theme, that's going to reduce our plastic footprint. That's going to reduce trash and waste that's going into the landfills and into the oceans. So it's another positive thing. And just one more thing, talking about partnerships. Recreation, I said, really took it hard for more than a year. Very difficult to have any programs. But we came back strongly in the fiscal year 22 ending in June. We served almost 18,000 meals to seniors in our senior nutrition program. That's also a program supported by the county. Recreation truly came back. They offered almost 1,300 activities in that year, servicing almost 23,000 people. So that's a really positive sign that people are being able to enjoy our services and programs again. So looking a little longer term, if I were to show you pictures of our city hall and library from originally when they first formed, that's about 1971 on the top, it's current on the bottom. I would say, what is the difference here? The difference is that we have better cameras now. It's the same clock, but it doesn't look like it. So these buildings are 50 years old. They're not seismically safe. They're not efficient. They're not effective. Our library is the oldest library in the county system. Our police officers, bless them, have been living in double-wide trailers. The good news is that was only a temporary solution. The bad news is they're in year 18 of that temporary solution, and it's just not right. So thanks to the strong community support of that voting for Measure O, which was our bond measure, we raised $50 million, and we're going to renovate the library to essentially a new building that is efficient, that is seismically safe, that provides better services. We're going to build a new police station on the City Hall parking lot that has all those same qualities, enhances services as well, and those buildings are going to be opening in 2024. It's taken a long time to get here, but they're in process, and we're actually making good progress on that. I should mention the library has vacated the main building. We have a temporary library until 2024 when it opens. If you want to know where it is when you leave here, look just across the aisle to the right. It's there, and that's where it's going to be for another year and a half or 2 years. Also, when I was here 4 years ago, we talked about general plan. We were going to finish our general plan update. I'm here to say we're about to finish our general plan update. Takes a long time. This is a multi-year deal. If you don't know what that is, that general plan is the document that defines everything we do in the city. So most people focus down on land use and they think of, you know, housing and commercial development. I think that's what's going on. But the general plan is more than housing. It's transportation, it's communication, it's open space, it's safety, it's noise, it's every component that makes this city run. It's a major undertaking. We spent years doing this update. We had a citizen advisory committee helping us. We had multiple citizen or community meetings to help us. There's no question the most visible portion of that document is housing, no question. And as part of this, we're doing a housing element. This is our 8-year plan for how we're going to meet the state demands for housing. I'm going to tell you how things have changed in 8 years, changed dramatically. In the 8-year cycle we're finishing now, the state mandated that we plan for 933 housing units. And that doesn't mean, make it clear, Campbell doesn't build housing. We identify where those sites could be to build that housing. We empower or we entitle the people that want to build the housing, but we don't build it. So 933 was a target that is at market and then is also below market. I can tell you our new target is just a few units shy of 3,000 units. It's more than triple. And we have to figure out where to put that in Campbell. You can't go this way, you go this way, you rezone, you repurpose. So that's kind of the challenge we have now. Again, we don't build it, but the challenge is how are we going to find 3,000 units in the city? And it's difficult, right? So the overall message for Campbell, I think, is really positive. But these things, especially some of these mandates, create some challenges, and they're not unique. Year after year, we talk about these challenges. Let's start with housing. I mentioned, you know, housing costs in Campbell, $2.2 million median. It's just stunning if you've lived here a long time. That's a regional issue. It doesn't matter where you are. A lot of cities here are more expensive. There are a few that are less expensive, but it's hard to afford here. It's a regional issue. It ties into jobs and housing imbalances and a lack of inventory in some places. And it's sometimes in our control from what we do, but other times it's not in our control. So we sit here in Campbell, and if 20,000 people join Google and work in downtown San Jose, and they don't want to live in downtown San Jose, they are 10 minutes or 15-minute ride to 3 light rail stations in Campbell. Is that going to impact our housing? I would assume it will, and we'll find out. But there are things like that that make it difficult for us to plan. Well, we're faced with building 3,000 units, potential, at least entitling 3,000 units or identifying them. That's at market, that's below market, moderate income, low income, very low income. And we do this while the state keeps changing laws. And the state essentially passes laws to accelerate housing and takes away a lot of the local control of our land use. So the most obvious thing that everybody knows if you're in a single family neighborhood is the state now allows, instead of having a max of one housing unit on a single family parcel, you can put 2 units, you can put a duplex, you can put multiple units, and you can add in an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, you can add a junior ADU, so you could have 3 or 4 units on that property. And would that change the vision or the look of that neighborhood? Probably, but will it happen everywhere? It's costly, so not necessarily, but it's allowed. So we have to plan knowing that these laws are changing and there are a lot of things out of our control. So the good news is council's taking the action. We're not fighting it. We've taken the action as appropriate to plan for 3,000 units. We buffer that so that we're not tied to those 3,000. If it doesn't fit in one area, we have a little buffer. We do that trying to protect the quality of the neighborhoods. It's a tough challenge because I will tell you, and I'm sure all the other councilmembers will tell you, for everybody that comes up and says, you are building too many units here and destroying the neighborhoods and whatever, there's somebody else that comes and tells us we aren't doing enough because there's a massive shortage of housing and we need more and more and more and we should go taller and deeper and all that. So it's quite a challenge. No question it affects, I'm sure, homelessness. There are underlying things that we have to address of addictions and mental illness, and we work with the county and regionally on those things. The county is the agency that has the funds for that and the services. But there's no question we have to deal with that continually. We have to deal with that compassionately. It does no good for one city to move people around and move them away and pop up in another city. So we try to work regionally to do that. One of the things we're lucky in Campbell to have, we have some faith-based organizations that have created safe parking programs. They provide an area and they provide meals for people that very sadly are living in their vehicles. But it is a safer place for that. Here's the sad part. I mean, having spoken to some of those people, they're typically not the people that you expect to have addictions or mental issues. They could be people that were totally fully employed, were living in an apartment. The one thing they didn't have was any savings. They lose that job, they lose some of their income. They're literally out on the street in a month, 2 months, 3 months. So it's very sad, and we can. I hope those programs, continue. I hope they expand, but it's a very difficult challenge that we have, and the regional cities and the county has, that we continue to work. Another thing impacting our housing plans is transportation. So when you think transportation, you normally think, how do we get people around efficiently, effectively, quickly, safely? How do we give people an opportunity to get out of their cars? But if they're in their cars, how do we make sure wherever they go, there's places to park? So, an issue here comes some of the state mandates again. The issue is we have to then plan for what the state calls transit-oriented development. So that means if you build a development by mass transit, so in Campbell, think light rail and bus lines. If you do that and you meet certain criteria, and that criteria could be, for example, the distance to the station, it could be the number of below market units. We've had proposals for 50% below market. We had one downtown for 100% below market. Then the state mandates that if they meet those criteria, those projects get approved ministerially. There's no public meeting, there's no public comment. They're approved because they meet the requirements. And we have to plan for that. So we know when we do plan, let's be honest, mass transit in Campbell is not the same as mass transit if you have BART or if you have Caltrain. We have light rail, we have bus lines, and for most of us, they don't take us where we need to go as quickly as we want to get there, and they certainly don't compete with efficiency and quick speed of a car. But we have to plan that these developments may come in there, and we have to work with the shortcomings that we have. That is our mass transit. We also have to figure out, there's a so-called first mile, last mile problem. If you do want to take transit, but you don't live near the stations, how do you get from your house to the station if you can't walk there? And how do you get from the station home when you arrive? These are challenges that keep people off, and I think we've all seen it. Light rail goes by, and it's very poorly, there's very poor attendance on their ridership, I should say. Same thing with buses. It's a hard thing. Now, what we can control in the city is we work to make the city more bicycle friendly. We work to make the city more pedestrian friendly. We do this with signage and lighting and more bike paths. We do this with crosswalks. A good example, pedestrian wasn't in the last year, certainly the portals that now enable you walk down between downtown and Prune Yard. It seems like a very safe, easy, friendly walk. It wasn't years ago when you had to go under the freeway. It was dark and it was scary. That's going to become even more important when Cressley Homes pops up, and it will be before 4 years, I promise you. The 4 years is just a one-time deal. But the other thing we do is we have what's called a traffic calming program. So traffic calming program says, what measures can we take? This could be lighting, stop signs, street lights, electronic lights, speed humps, speed bumps. How do we slow down speed in the residential neighborhoods? Because if we can do that, it is safer for people to get out of their cars and get on a bicycle or walk. So we tie that in as well, and we try to work it that way. The last challenge I want to talk about, and this is also an annual thing, economic development. I mentioned earlier, we rely so heavily on property taxes in the city, and we also rely on sales taxes. Here's the problem. If you've been in this city for 30, 40, 50 years, and you own a home, and you own that home under something called Prop 13, so your assessment might be $100,000 or $200,000. We get 10% of property taxes. That's all we get. And for sales taxes, we get a penny and a quarter of every dollar spent that's susceptible or open to sales tax. So if you have that house and it's assessed for $100,000 or $200,000, and we're getting 10% of your property tax, you're not paying enough in for taxes to get the services that you just individually as a couple are getting. That's not a judgment, it's just a fact. So that means the city requires other revenue sources, that is sales taxes from residents, from visitors, it's property taxes from commercial developments, it's property taxes from new residential developments that get assessed at market value. So I mentioned 2.2 million before, that's all of a sudden much higher. It could be easily 10, 15 times what some people are paying in property tax. So the challenge again, now it's council's challenge, how do we attract the right businesses that can help us with sales tax? And how do we attract the right developments, that's commercial and it's residential. We get a revenue stream in, but how do we do that without impacting everybody that's already here and the congestion that it's going to cause and the parking difficulties it's going to cause? There's not a real good answer, but we have to balance that, and it's really ongoing. And the last piece of that financially is we're looking not only to get revenue to pay our services, we're looking at revenues for that next downturn that go into reserves, because that's what keeps us going when the revenues go down. So I like to, it's just facetiously say, I mean, are we post-COVID? We don't really know. But are we post-COVID? Here's my facetious part. Or are we pre the next variant? We don't know. And if we are, then we have to plan that we're going to eat, we know how we could eat up $9 million overnight. So that's a really big challenge in the city to make it work financially. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I'm not going to leave you on doom and gloom. We've welcomed back local events. Our chamber CEO is here. Thank you, Ken. Our Boogie Festival is back. Our Oktoberfest Festival is back. It's October 15th. Please come and enjoy. The local races we have for Valentine's Day and also Oktoberfest are back. We brought back music in the park in the Orchard Green. It was a little short in season because we had hoped that the library would be starting construction by then. But all of a sudden you saw live music, live event. You saw crowds on the Orchard Green. It was great to see because there was a year of just emptiness before that. You know, in Campbell, we have an iconic water tower. It means a lot to us. We have some fun. We light it red, white, and blue on national holidays. We have a little more fun. We light it on Valentine's Day and Halloween and St. Patrick's Day. Former Mayor Baker here, I think, was involved in that discussion. And people like it. It's very visible. But we also use it to bring awareness to important causes, like the fight against domestic violence, the fight against cancer, the fight against Alzheimer's disease. In every May, we light the tower blue. The blue up there, as you see, is for National Peace Officers Week. We light it on the Wednesday that week, which is Peace Officers Memorial Day. On the, let's see, in June, we light the tower in rainbow colors for California Pride Month. Happy to say that was done first in my last term as mayor. And this year, for a number of months now, on the first of each month, you'll see the tower lit in blue and gold. This is to show support for the people suffering in Ukraine. It's a small gesture, but it's one that shows the community cares. So, I want to talk, we're going to close out soon, I don't want to keep you too long. We talk about our small town feel in Campbell, and that's important to us. It comes from our people, it comes from residents, but it also comes from those who serve us. So, I'd like to recognize a few people tonight that exemplify our community spirit, who make this an even better place. I'm going to talk first about the police. So I've been on council almost 8 years. It is amazing how fast it goes, right? When I started, we had so many officers that were 15 years here, 20 years, 23, 24. I remember talking to the chief at the time that there's going to be a huge turnover with retirements and things like that. And now we have a police force, great police force, but 50% of the officers approximately are here left fewer than 5 years. It's really, really changed. I mentioned earlier, it's so tough to recruit, but we've done, our officers and Chief Berg have done a great job bringing in new officers. There's typically little visibility to what our officers do on a daily basis. So I wanted to share, take a few minutes and just give you an example of what a couple of our officers have done that really impacted our life here and really impacted the safety in Campbell. So I'm going to ask you to join me in welcoming Officers Bonnie Brannon and Dominic Viasica and Chief Berg as well. Please join us. Thank you for being here. So let me tell you a little bit about each of these officers. Officer Brannon was sworn in 2020 under the ceremony. She primarily works night shift, so we probably got to get you going, I guess. I'm told that she excels in keeping our streets safe by safe from impaired drivers. That's not why she's here. She's here for something. This is indicative of what our officers do on a daily basis. So 2 months ago, Officer Brannon was called to a report of burglary in process. Now, by the time she arrived at this commercial site, the suspect had already entered and already left. So in some areas, some cities, there's no threat anymore. That would be a report, and that's about it. And it might even be a report online. But it's not typically the way we do things in Campbell. So Officer Brannon did some investigation. She got the on-site video and determined that this person that went into this building was wearing an ankle monitor. Ankle monitors, of course, have GPS, so the lesson tonight is if you're on an ankle monitor, don't commit a crime. But, you know, she saw the ankle monitor, did some extensive investigation, identified this person. This person, it turns out, was on release already for gun charges. She went and got a warrant for the ankle monitor, and the GPS functioned to the ankle monitor. It was able to place that person in the building. But it got better than that. She didn't let it go there. So our agencies in the area, they share alerts and who they're looking for. And she recognized that this was a person also wanted by San Jose PD. And it wasn't for a gun charge, it was for an assault. It was for an assault on somebody with an axe. So we have somebody that's released for gun charges, now is wanted for assault and an axe. Her warrant covered that period as well, and she was able to show that he was at the axe assault scene as well. So because of doing extra investigation, she took what I'll call a petty theft, literally a petty theft, because all that was taken from the commercial building was petty cash. So she took a petty cash theft, essentially, and turned it into removing a very violent, armed person from our streets. So I wanted to express that happens every day, and we never hear about that, so I wanted to thank her for doing that. So, Officer Vyasika joined Campbell PD from the Sheriff's Office in January 21. So this is more type of thing you see on patrol if you've been fortunate enough to do a ride-along, just sheer observation, intuition. He stopped a suspicious vehicle with 3 parties in it and determined that there was stolen property, stolen mail, identity theft going on, and also drug crimes. So if you are like me, I just personally, on my street, they've had porch pirates, right? Property theft, you know pretty much. Everybody knows to keep it under a certain level. If you keep it under $950, it's a misdemeanor or a ticket or maybe neither. Also identity theft. My office a number of years ago in Campbell was broken into. They stole property, they stole checks, which they then wrote. That's identity theft. But again, because you keep the number under the $950, it's a misdemeanor. They caught them and essentially very little happens. Well, it could have ended there. It's just a misdemeanor. It's a ticket. It's released. But Officer Vyasika did a lot of investigation. He was able to determine that there were 10 independent victims of identity theft here. And in doing so, the charges got elevated to felony. And that removes the people from the street that normally would just be back on doing this again. So that's really just comes from hard work. I want to add one more thing. A few months later, he attempted another traffic stop, again, just because there was somebody acting suspiciously in a drug area. That car took off. And that car got in an accident and the person ran. And with some backup, they caught this person. In that investigation, they found a concealed loaded 9mm handgun with no serial number. So nothing good is happening there as well. So basically, essentially, that person, by the way, also was on release with an existing felony warrant. So essentially, because of observation of just how cars may be driving or how people are acting, some intuition and follow-up, and some good investigation, these officers have taken a couple of very, very violent people off of our streets. And in the second case, I talked about the identity theft. Officer Vyasika was able to return property as well, which is a great thing. Doesn't normally happen. So I wanted to bring them up here because these are not the stories you normally hear on the 11 o'clock news, right? You hear the ones that make the news, but this is what happens every day. It's observation, it's intuition, it's hard work on the street. It's removing violent people. It's prime examples of what's going on, especially with our newer and our younger officers. So I want to ask you to join me in thanking Officers Brandon and Vyasika for what they do, and I want to give them a commendation for their work. We're almost done, I promise you. The other side of public safety, of course, is fire services. So I'm going to ask you to join me in welcoming Captain Jeff Jacobs and also Chief Gurgau. And I think Chief Lowell, you're going to join us as well. If you could please come up. So I want to talk about a couple of our members of Santa Clara County Fire. Unfortunately, the second one is not here tonight. I'll explain that. But Captain Jacobs has been with Santa Clara County Fire since 2011, assigned to the Sunny Oak Station. He's a former Army flight medic with multiple deployments. He's a former firefighter, engineer, paramedic. and a member of the Fire Department Special Operations. So we all know, we see what's visible in the reports. There's fires, there's other emergencies. Captain Jacobs does a lot behind the scenes. Again, things we never see. So Captain Jacobs is integral in developing training programs and instructing other firefighters. So he instructs others in live fire and fire hose management training. These are behind the scenes activities, but he has expertise in these areas. His expertise, his continued dedication to learning more. He imparts that to other firefighters. He keeps other firefighters proficient in the latest firefighting techniques and measures. He enhances their safety by extension. Then he enhances the service we get in Campbell, and it enhances our safety as well. Now, I also wanted to recognize firefighter, engineer, paramedic Eric Hafman. He's not here tonight. I've asked Chief Lally to step in and accept on his behalf. Firefighter Hafman joined County Fire in 2014, also with the Sunny Oaks Station. He also is a leader in training. He does forcible entry training. He trains new recruits for the department. One of the things I really like about Firefighter Hafman, and also in the past Captain Jacobs, as a part of his position as a paramedic, so he provides a patient advocate. So he's providing services to people in really bad times. And I like that, to point that out, because I can tell you, I speak from experience. I have watched this engine company pull up in front of my house for a neighbor right across the street who was in serious distress, medical distress, tremendous pain. And I watched the care of getting her out of that house safely, comfortably, to a waiting ambulance. I'm doing this while dealing with the distraught family, obviously, that's right there. And I'll tell you what, I have never seen any better compassion or more compassion in a hospital environment. I'm sure we've all heard people always say, why does fire show up when there's an accident? Why does fire show up when the EMTs are there or whatever? Because of that level of care. So it's so important. We think of the fires, we think of other things, but we don't think of the paramedic services as much. So I'm really appreciative to have both of these officers, these firefighters commended tonight. So we're recognizing both of them, and I'm sorry that Firefighter Hafman can't be here, but we're recognizing them for their commitment to excellence, for their strong efforts to improve the quality of service in our city, for their commitment to our community. I ask you to thank them for what they do every day. Who is the new chief. Chief Lally is here as well, accepting, and Chief Lally is the person responsible for our services in Campbell. So we thank you for being here and for doing that. So just about done. We're going to finish up. There are tons of ways to stay connected in Campbell. You see all of this. I want to point to two things: the Campbell PD app at the bottom, the City of Campbell Civic Plus app. These are great apps. They're available on the Apple Store. They're available at the Google Play Store. The City app, frankly, it's easier to find stuff on the City app than it is on the website. The PD app is great. You can even report in on non-emergency things. So I encourage everybody to do that. Lastly, really want to thank everybody involved in helping me do the State of the City. From the City Manager's Office, Kira Fields, thank you so much, because she's responsible for the slides and moving the slides along. I appreciate that. Also, Angelique Gaeta, Diana Johnson, that helped me from day one in this, so I appreciate everything you did. From the Recreation and Community Services Department, they own this community center, this building, and by virtue of this room then. And Natasha Bissell, Lauren Merriman, and all their volunteers that helped them tonight as well. I'll comment again, they took such a hit during COVID. They did the best they could. They worked with what they had. They never complained, and they're coming back strong. So the recreation people are stellar. And last but not least, the IT department. We had to change everything we did, in the city with regards to online services, but the IT department helped me get this done today, and Cecil and your team, Cecil Lawson, I appreciate it very much. There would be no event without all of these people, so if you would just join me in thanking them. I want to thank you. So I snuck in a picture of the first dog here. This is and I did it because I can. I thank you for attending tonight. We have refreshments in the back. We have your electeds here, your council members, all your council members are here, happy to chat with you. Senior staff is here. If you haven't met them, please take that opportunity. Neighbors are here as well. I thank you for attending. Good night, everyone.